Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is David Turley with I Love New York. We're going to be joined by Ross Levi momentarily, but welcome, and we're so happy that you're joining our webinar today. Ross, whenever you're ready, you have the mic, you have the floor.
Great, thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. As David mentioned, I'm Ross Levi. I'm the Executive Director of the New York State Division of Tourism. I love New York, and a Vice President here at Empire State Development, which many of you know is New York State's Economic Development Agency. I am thrilled, sincerely, to welcome you all here to the first in a new series of I Love New York industry programming. We have a great mix of new partners and old friends joining us in the audience today, and we're so excited to have you all here. Any of you who have heard me speak over the last couple of years have probably heard me talk about I Love New York's plan to reinvigorate our educational offerings for the state's tourism industry, and we're so pleased that we are able to realize that today. We want to thank those industry partners who participated in our research leading up to today to help ensure that we are presenting truly useful information for all of you and useful content and in a way that is as effective and efficient and convenient as possible. In the coming months, you will be seeing a variety of programs in a variety of different formats that we hope will provide New York's tourism industry with knowledge and tools to help make our state an even more desirable destination for visitors. I want to thank David Turley, who opened us up here today, who is our Director of Tourism Programs and Operations, as well as Heather McElhenney, who is our Director of Tourism Programs and Operations, for their work getting this program off the ground in collaboration with many other members of the I Love New York team. Today, we have a very appropriate topic to kick off our series to discuss accessible tourism. It fits squarely within I Love New York's commitment to diversity and inclusion, and also highlights a way to connect with an important and profitable market segment in the tourism industry, as you'll hear momentarily from our expert presenters. And so with that, I'd like to hand off the webinar to Sarah Emmert. She is our Director of Tourism Policy Initiatives here at I Love New York. She helped launch the I Love New York Accessible Tourism Initiative and continues to oversee it in addition to her many other duties. So thank you again for being here. Sarah, the screen is yours.
Thank you, Ross. Before we begin our presentation today, I'd just like to note that folks are encouraged to ask questions throughout the program via the Q&A function. We'll pause about halfway through after Open Doors organization gives their remarks, just to give some time to answer questions that might have come through. And then we'll also open the floor at the end for Q&A. So please feel free to send questions as we go throughout the presentation today. We're going to kick off today's presentation with an overview of the program and then turn things over to our friends at Open Doors organization to go over their nationwide market research and best practices, and then turn things back to us to talk about Accessible New York, walk through the survey, the hub, and how to be involved in the program. So thank you all for joining today. This program has been one that's been years in the making, going back to the 2016 Tourism Summit. At that summit, our deliverable was as follows on the slide. Recognizing that anyone, regardless of physical limitations, abilities, or age, should be able to enjoy New York's world-class attractions and events, the governor tasked the Division of Tourism with including expanded accessibility information on the I Love New York website and app, and provide technical assistance and training to our tourism partners and destinations. Years ago, the only accessibility description or feature we had on ilovenewyork.com was a singular checkbox for wheelchair accessibility. This obviously doesn't represent the full consumer experience for travelers with all types of accessibility needs. It didn't answer a number of questions that travelers might have, like, can I get into the facility? Can I go to the restroom? Can I experience each of the main activities available? By not providing this basic information, we also weren't considering all the folks that we possibly weren't reaching. 67.5 million American adults have some type of disability. That's a huge number of people that we can better serve. And that represents a $58.7 billion market that's only growing. We knew we could do better. And by doing so, we'd be reaching out to this massive market with huge economic impact potential for the state. So the Accessible New York program was created to extend an invitation to travelers with accessibility needs. We also recognized that the need to meet this needed several supporting goals. So we realized that there was a need for a resource for travelers to plan accessible vacations. At the time, we didn't have a collective guide with information on accessibility, nor did we have a streamlined process for accurately capturing data. Just finding accurate, reliable, up-to-date information on accessibility is often the biggest challenge for travelers with accessibility needs. The program's designed to provide as much accessibility information as possible for those looking to plan a vacation to the state. And we want to be super clear, this program is not about policing or penalizing attractions for not following ADA guidelines. This was more about how can we get as much accessibility information to consumers as possible to give them the tools they need to make an informed decision about what to experience in the state. So understanding the need on impact and size of the accessible travel market, we set out to answer a few questions. That includes the few that you see on the screen. What's the potential market size of travelers with accessibility needs coming to the state? What are the types of accessibility needs? How prevalent are they? What are the demographics for travelers with disability needs at a national and New York State level? What are the travel behaviors for those with accessibility needs? What do they look for when planning a trip? What's the perception of our state as an accessible destination? And what are the general requirements for creating a positive visitor experience for travelers with accessibility needs? To make sure that we lived up to these program goals and captured accurate data, we partnered with Open Doors organization. They're globally renowned in the accessible travel market, and they were here to help us answer these questions and more. So now I'd just like to introduce Craig Kennedy and Laurel Van Horn from Open Doors organization, who will be walking us through the next section of our presentation. Craig is actually originally from the Adirondacks. He now resides and skis in Steamboat Springs, Colorado. After a skiing accident that left him paralyzed, Craig and his wife, Andy, founded Access Anything, a disability adventure travel resource. At Open Doors, he's often on the road, as he is right now, training with clients such as Amtrak and British Airways. And Craig also headed up this project for Open Doors for the state and conducted a number of site visits throughout New York State. He's happy to get back upstate at any time. Laurel Van Horn is a longtime resident of New York City. Laurel is a pioneer in the promotion of inclusive travel worldwide. Past projects include a series of access guides for AAA and 2 Open Doors easy access travel guides. In addition to developing training programs at Open Doors, she leads their research efforts and helped develop the survey for our project. It's been our utmost pleasure to work with Craig and Laurel on this project. So now I'm excited to turn it over to them. Oh, Laurel, I think you're on mute, sorry.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Sarah. This is really wonderful to be here today to see the next stage of this project, which we've been working on for some time now. So if you can show the next slide, please. So I'm just going to begin by talking a little bit about market research and some of the findings that we have at Open Doors organization. Next slide. So as Sarah already mentioned, 1 in 4 American adults has a disability of some type. When we start our disability awareness training courses, we talk about myths and misconceptions. And one of these is that it's a really small niche market. Well, now we realize it's growing all the time, in part because of our aging population, which we'll also address later on in the slides. Next slide, please. So another myth is that it's all about mobility. And as you heard before, what was on the site previously just had to do with wheelchair access. But there's a lot of different needs. Mobility, yes, it's the most common one. It's almost 14% of adults with disabilities. But surprisingly, cognition is next, and that's things like autism, dementia, developmental disabilities, just memory loss, forgetting words. Um, and of course, things like self-care and independent living are also important. What we're looking at here are people who are not in nursing homes. These people are living independently, but they have their spouse or some other family member to assist them and travel with them. Vision and hearing, this is another types of disabilities that become more prevalent as we age. So this is why in our survey, we look at all these different disabilities and make sure that everyone's needs are being met as they come and visit our state. Next slide, please. So at Open Doors organization, way back in 2002, we decided that we really need to address a major gap, and that was the lack of information on travel by people with disabilities. How can businesses make a decision to invest in our market if they really don't understand the market? And so in 2020, we actually conducted our fourth such study. It took place in June and July. And what we did was we tried to benchmark the boom period really in travel before the pandemic. So we were looking at travel in 2018 and 2019. So this time, as in the past studies, we found that about 70% of people with disabilities are traveling long distance. They don't travel that often sometimes, but they're now taking about 3 trips on average over the 2-year period. There are also a group within that who are frequent travelers who take 6 or more trips over the 2 years. And that's up to 19% now of these people. So I think people, once they get out there, they find they can travel and that their needs are met, they are going to keep traveling. Mostly, as you see from this slide, it's pleasure. It's for vacation or other kind of leisure trip. It's 69% of that group. Almost everybody is traveling for vacation. So that's definitely our market here at I Love New York. People are also traveling for business or combining business and pleasure, but to a much lesser degree. Next slide, please. Of course, in terms of commercial traveling by air is the most popular. So it's up to 55% of the travelers are actually flying. Median trips is 2 over the 2-year period. And again, we've got a significant number who are traveling frequently. So 22% are traveling 3 or more times. When we look at train and motor coach travel, it's a smaller group, but as we see, it's increasing. So from 2015 to 2020, we did see some improvement in those figures as well. And both these are important for New York State. We can get around the state by train, unlike many states. Motor coach is also important within our state. Next slide, please. But of course, most of all, people with disabilities love to travel in their own cars. And really, this is not so different from the general population. But for them, it's so much more convenient. They can travel with their assistive device, bring along their medications and so on. They don't have to worry about getting to and from the airport. Can they get an accessible taxi and so on. So people are driving. And of course, that's really important for us at I Love New York. So one of the things that we asked this time in our study, thinking of this project specifically, was how long are people willing to travel in their car, whether they're driving or just riding, in order to get to their destination. So we found it was about 6 hours on average, but a full third of our study said that they were willing to travel 10 or more hours. So that's important for driving to some of our upstate destinations. Next slide, please. And then for the first time in 2020, we did look at the kind of activities that people participate in when they're on vacation. Now, the top 4 are eating at a restaurant at 70%, visiting a family or like attending a family event is 52%, local shopping was 45%, and then all kinds of tourist attractions came in at 43%. So when you look at the list of all the different kinds of activities that people want to participate in, it's just as broad as the general public. A full third were interested in visiting a museum or art gallery, going to a state or a national park, enjoying the beach. 20% about wanted to take a guided tour, go to a concert, or visit a theme park or water park. But there's also people who wanted to engage in recreational activities outdoors. And I know that Craig and I both visited sites upstate that really cater to this part of the population that wants that active outdoor experience. So once again, we all can reach out to these people through this project and make sure that they're coming to our resort and enjoying what we have to offer. Next slide, please. Another thing we look at in our study is how much money is being spent. One of the myths is that people with disabilities are all poor and they don't have the money to really spend on vacations and holidays. Well, what we found this time is that the spending had jumped more than 50% from 2015 to 2020. It's now up to $725 spent just on the last vacation. And of course, on the left, you can see here, it's on cruise fares and airfares, but also on lodging, car rentals, food and beverage, entertainment, and so on. So again, it's important that we all get a piece of this pie. And I should also add that this is spending just by the person with the disability. It's not the spending of their companions who are traveling with them. And this time in 2020, we found that on average, people were traveling with 2 other adults and 1 child. So this really is group travel. So if you're missing out on, the person with the disability because you're not putting the information out there, then you're missing out on a whole group of people who could be coming to your resort or attraction. Next slide, please. Another thing we look at always is what cities are people traveling to across the country. And New York City, again, came out right at the top of the list, this time along with Las Vegas and Orlando. But then many other cities are popular as well, that we see the same cities coming up over time. Partly it's that they are putting out information and they are accessible and say they are welcoming people. I'm going to turn it over now to Craig in the next slide to talk about the market for New York State specifically. And this is research that he conducted as we started the program.
Thank you, Laurel. That was great. And I will say that I'm also very excited to be here. This is a very cool project. And I know that New York State is the first to do something like this. So we're very happy to be part of it. So you heard from Laurel on the stats that we have collected. And basically those stats show you who is traveling. So this data on this chart, we developed at the start of the I Love New York project, so we could see how many more people might travel. What's the potential in this market? So we gathered data on New York State, as well as the surrounding 6 states, as you can see here, Connecticut, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Vermont. Because we want to see who was in driving distance of our many regional attractions. So the estimates on potential travelers and spending are actually based on our 2015 Open Doors Harris Market Study. The numbers you heard from Laurel were a little different. So these numbers will actually be changed, but these are based on 2015 study. And we looked at the number of potential travelers with disabilities in each state and based the number on a $500 spending average. You already heard from Laurel that that's gone up to $750. But this $500 average is, again, just for the individual with a disability. That's not for what we call their entourage, but they typically travel with 1.7 other individuals on average. So this gives us our multiplier of 1.7, which you can see what effect that has in that far right column. All right, so the total potential spending from those 7 states, as you see in the bottom right corner, $4.15 billion. This is who might be traveling and who could be spending money in New York State. And again, those numbers are going to be much higher when adjusted to the 2020 study. So, these are pretty staggering to think about, really, and just a huge spending potential in this market. Next slide, please. So we wanted to include this because we saw this article recently, and I'm hoping that a lot of you guys saw this recent article in the New York Times. And what it did was it talked about how older travelers, our baby boomers, a large percent of our population, are now getting vaccinated for COVID, and they are the first group of people to get vaccinated. So what does that mean? That they are likely going to be, and we're already seeing the bookings, they're likely going to be the first group of people out there booking again and traveling on a leisure basis. But they're really going to help. I think they'll be the first ones out of the blocks, let's say, and we think they'll be a big reason for the start of this return of our travel market. So let's talk about this fast growing section of our population. What do we need to know about this market? First, by 2030, Americans who are 65 and older will make up 20% of the population. That's a huge number, more than 70 million people. So that's something to think about. And that represents buying power, of course. Secondly, more than half of our adults 65 and older also have a disability. With age, often comes disability. And many older adults, of course, have multiple limitations such as hearing or vision loss, maybe reduced mobility, cognitive delays, things like dementia, Alzheimer's, memory loss, and then, of course, potentially other chronic health problems as well the older we get. This group also wants to remain active and independent. And, they have the time to travel, they have the money to travel. And it's important to get good, accurate accessibility information put online on our websites. It basically is like rolling out a welcome mat for our guests, for these travelers. Well, let's make it easy for them. So, and then of course, this is the first group that's getting vaccinated. Once our younger Americans get vaccinated, we expect, this multi-generational travel really to surge. Grandparents have to be missing their grandkids and their kids. And kids and grandkids are looking forward to get out and doing family vacations again. So if any member of that family has a disability, young or old, that group is going to book where their needs can be met, where the accessibility is best. So having accessibility information already available and accurate information online on your website, again, welcome that. That's really going to help bring people to you. Next slide, please. Oh, one more. So I want to talk about some best practices here. So one of the most important things you can do, of course, for your staff is to provide annual sensitivity training that covers things like proper language and etiquette. So how do we talk to people with disabilities? How do we treat people with disabilities? Your staff needs to know the basics of interacting with people with disabilities so that they can make people feel welcome and accommodated. Also remember that many disabilities are hidden. You may not see the disability. You may not realize somebody has a disability until you interact with them. Just remember that people are people. Customer service is customer service. Don't make assumptions about people, what you think they can do, what you think they can't do. Just provide the help as requested. It's also important to ensure that your staff are familiar with the actual accessibility features that you have on site, your services, your equipment. If your staff knows this, they can accurately pass that information along to guests that are either calling or on the website, but your staff needs to be informed. They need to have that accurate information as well. I also think it's important to remind everybody that the Americans with Disability Act, the ADA, is a law of minimums. So we think it's better to go above and beyond the minimum ADA regulations and really make the effort to stand out when it comes to your access. Offering things like companion or unisex restrooms, automatic doors, a discount for people with disabilities and maybe their caregiver. These are just a few things that we can do to help you stand out and be remembered as a place that was accessible. And of course, a big part of this was the survey that we created for I Love New York. Now it's up online. By taking this survey at ilovenewyork.com, there's a lot of things you can do for your business. You can promote the features of your property that are accessible. You can also discover what you might need to fix so that you can really fully welcome people with disabilities. And I mean, all types of disabilities, of course. This will help you plan improvements, both in the short term and the long term, medium term as well. A lot of these things are probably easier than we think to fix. Oftentimes a lot of things have quick, easy, inexpensive fixes. Things like, in the case of lodging, one of the biggest complaints and something for me being a wheelchair user is not having a shower chair or shower bench available, at lodging. These benches are, not the typical thing you get at a drugstore or medical supply company. Having these on hand, I can't necessarily buy or rent one when I come to visit you. So it's important that you guys have one, and they're under $100. So very inexpensive to have something like this. Another easy fix would be, adjusting how easy it is to open your doors. Oftentimes entry doors are big, heavy things, and the weight can be adjusted, both going in and out of buildings and in and out of guest rooms for lodging. Really a benefit for, and not only for adults and people using wheelchairs, but this is a benefit for kids as well. Remember, kids aren't as strong and have trouble opening doors too. Now, many people also have food allergies. So, why not add something like a gluten-free or nut-free option to your menu? Again, just a few suggestions. Now, this may seem daunting if you're really not sure where to start or how to start this process. Open Doors organization can definitely help. This month we're actually introducing a brand new e-learning course on disability etiquette and sensitivity training. That will be up on our website soon, and really is a simple, affordable way to get started. If you're not sure how to start this process, I think we can help. You can also contact us and we can get you a copy of our appropriate language sheet, some common courtesy tips, things like that. Next slide, please. So I do want to talk about a couple places just real quick here. Laurel and I did site visits for several places. The Wild Center and Wild Walk near Tupper Lake, New York was one of the places we went. And the reason we put this on here is because they definitely are a good example of going above and beyond access. The walk itself is fully accessible. So is their, I think it's called the Greenleaf Pond Loop Trail, which is a short trail, but it's nice and short, accessible. Somebody in a power chair could do it, less than a half a mile. The main building and exhibits were actually designed using your universal design. Somewhere in the future, handicap accessible won't be a term. Everything will be designed for everybody, works for everybody. So they've already thought of that in building their main building and their exhibits. They definitely have universal design built in there. Basically means, again, it's designed for everybody, will work for everybody at any time. They also provide manual wheelchairs. You can borrow a walker or a power scooter. Again, they're free to borrow. You just need to call ahead a little bit and let them know. Same thing, they have this other great tour they do for people who are blind or low vision. Again, you'll need to call ahead for that, but it is specifically designed to cater to people who are blind or have low vision. And then the Wild Center also offers things like captioning on all of their theater movies. They even have a sensory-friendly day for people with autism and other cognitive disabilities. And then lastly, I just want to say a couple good things. Laura went to one of the state parks, Letchworth State Park, and was really impressed with their accessibility. New York State Park System does have some great accessibility. And when we visited Letchworth, found out that in addition to their basic accessibility, like parking and signage and things like that, they also offer companion restrooms that we mentioned earlier, discounts for visitors with disabilities. And then also they even have a designated service animal relief area for people that have a service animal with them. So the other thing we thought was really great was the scenic overlooks. You weren't going to miss any views there. You could just pull up, check out the view. It was really amazing. So obviously we visited more places than this that were accessible and had features, but this is what we had time to talk about. I just wanted to really highlight a couple of those things. So thank you. I think we're turning it back over to Sarah now, but there's my information. So if you need, you can contact me directly for information if you want that sheet on sensitivity tips and language. Again, just shoot me an email. And I'm happy to take care of you. Thank you guys so much for listening.
Thank you, Craig and Laurel. That was wonderful. We did have a couple of questions come in. So the first one was, why are food allergies not included as a disability in New York State as they are in other states? For example, Massachusetts requires all restaurants to be trained in food allergy awareness. It is very difficult to dine in restaurants who are not aware of the risks of allergies or refuse to serve folks due to those allergies. I personally have experienced both. So I'm not sure if you, Laurel or Craig, have any thoughts on that.
This is Laurel. Yes. I think that, you know, over time, we're paying more and more attention to different issues. I mean, it wasn't long ago we didn't hear anything about autism. Now allergies are finally getting, you know, a lot more attention. And so not every legislature has really gotten to this yet. Um, we're still fighting with the airlines to make sure that people's needs are being met in terms of allergies. So I would say it's coming. But as we traveled around the state for this project, we did see many people who did already address this on their menus. So hopefully New York State will also come up with something as well, because it's really important. It's life and death for people.
Great. And then the next question was, we are a museum operating out of a historic house, and we have made our first floor ADA accessible. But it is virtually impossible to do so for the whole house while also maintaining the historic character of the house. Is there anything we can do to be more welcoming? Are there any technological solutions like VR or digital tours?
Craig, do you want to take that, or?
So that's always been an issue for historical building. You know, I've seen some workarounds depending on if the whole building is historical, or if only part of it is, and you can build an external ramp or lift into a door or something. But if it is not feasible, you're not necessarily required by law to do it. But as long as people know that information ahead of time, I think that is what is valuable, so that they don't show up expecting to be able to see the upper floor. As long as you're, you know, transparent about that. But not everything, especially in a historical building, is required if it will affect the state of that historical designation. So I don't know if you have anything to add there, Laurel.
Yeah, definitely. It's so easy to take videos now and make videos, and it's make sure it's captioned as well. And you can have that on a screen downstairs so that people can still see everything in the rest of the building. I mean, that's how they did it in Springfield, Illinois, at you know, Lincoln's home, for example. They had a lift to get into the building. And then at that point, they just had pictures, but I'm sure by now they've moved on to videos as well. But then people are happy with that.
Great. Thank you so much. And that was all the questions that we had for this section. But again, I encourage folks to, you know, continue submitting questions if you have any throughout the rest of the program. But thank you, Craig and Laurel. I appreciate your time today and your presentation. So just moving on to our next section on the Accessible New York program. This will cover how we look to collect the accurate accessibility information. So as Craig was mentioning before, our survey. After consulting with Open Doors, it became clear that the best way to create a positive experience was to provide as much accessibility information as possible about locations and attractions in the state. This information was collected through that extensive survey that considered 4 different accessibility needs: mobility, vision, hearing, and cognition. Our survey was designed to be customizable based on attraction type, so only questions pertaining to the respondent's facility would appear. That's helping us to capture data from a diverse field of attractions that included everything from beaches and parks to living history museums. For example, we ask about beach mats for beach facilities and rides for amusement parks. So it's really catered based on that specific attraction. Additionally, we realized that ADA language can be overwhelming. So we tried to walk respondents through terms and requirements in a straightforward way with pictures and multiple questions. So for example, instead of just asking, is your bathroom accessible, and listing all of the ADA requirements, we broke it out into sub questions like, does the stall bathroom have grab bars next to and behind the toilet? And then you can answer yes and no and move on to the next requirement. We also provided pictures where needed to give a true feel for what an accessible bathroom should look like. Oftentimes pictures really say the most and give the best description. We also included questions that don't specifically deal with ADA requirements. So as Craig mentioned, going above and beyond ADA, but they're helpful for improving the consumer experiences. So for example, do you offer the sensory days for those with cognitive needs? We saw the survey as a blueprint for attractions that might not realize the interests or information that travelers with accessibility needs are looking for. We wanted this survey to also assist locations just interested in becoming more accessible, but just not knowing where to start. The survey is exhaustive, but that's the point. We really want to help attractions, restaurants, and hotels leave no stone unturned and provide as much information as possible. That way, the results would then provide a roadmap for people with varying accessibility needs to see that information and make an informed decision about their trip planning. For our first round of surveys, we sent the template to 250 different attractions across the state. And that made up a mix of lodging, food and beverage, theme parks, museums, and state parks. We ended up receiving full or partial responses from about 88% of the participants. That was 101 fully completed and 121 partially completed surveys. We were really happy with this result because, as I mentioned, the survey is a little bit longer, but it's extremely valuable. And we were glad that so many locations understood that value and took the time to sit down and look at their accessibility. Open Doors visited 14 of the attractions as site visits, as Craig mentioned before, just to verify the results. And additionally, 10 of the fully completed surveys were chosen at random to participate in spot checks by phone just to verify that information. So just for this next section, we're going to give you a look at the results of the survey and what consumers can now experience and use on our website for trip planning. So obviously, those completed surveys provided us with a huge amount of raw data, and we wanted to present it in a clean format for consumers. So we launched the Accessible New York Hub on ilovenewyork.com in July to commemorate the 30th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act. From this first slide, you're watching a short demo of what that page currently looks like on our website. And then it goes to a listing and basically how you can find that expanded accessibility information that the surveys were able to provide us. Each listing appears the same as it would elsewhere on I Love New York site. However, it now contains this entire section with its own expanded accessibility features. From this information on each listing, consumers can navigate more than 100 sites' accessibility features and sort by category, location, and accessibility amenities based on the following needs: blind and low vision, cognitive and autism spectrum, deaf and hearing loss, and mobility and wheelchair access. So it's covering a range of accessibility. This next slides that we're just going through are the current accessibility amenities that are captured by the survey. Obviously, not every location will fulfill each amenity, but that's okay. We anticipate that. The thought here was to provide as many fields as possible to capture as much raw data from the survey that we could. And if you don't fill a field, it's not going to show up. So it's not like it's a ding against your location. It'll only appear if you've answered the survey and checkmarked that box and have that accessibility need. Because as we mentioned before, the information that we can provide, the more information we can provide, the better. Each location has its own unique needs and availabilities. So we understand that. The next slide. The hub also features blogs that focus on special programming and offer travel inspiration, including a firsthand account from Corey Lee. He's a travel blogger who offers his perspective as a wheelchair user. We'll look to bolster that editorial content in the future, but we're really glad to have a good compilation of accessible destinations across the state to highlight right now, as we realize there's a lot of really great experiences in New York State for travelers with accessibility needs. Now I'm just going to hand it over to my colleague, Kelly Garofalo. She's the Senior Manager of Tourism Projects, to walk everyone through how you can get involved with the program. She's been an essential member of our team, working closely with me to help bring this program to fruition. So handing it to you, Kelly.
Great, thank you, Sarah. So yeah, just in this next section, we're going to talk about how you can be involved now that we've given you the extensive background. And in this section, we're just going to go over various things. The first is how we've adapted the first round survey that Sarah just talked about, how we've adapted that based on our learnings. We're also going to give an overview of what the new survey format looks like and its various features. So we'll give you a few screenshots so you can see how it's evolved. We're also going to talk about who is involved in the new survey process, mainly tourism promotion agents, must-see attractions, and other attractions. And finally, we're going to cover how you can access this new survey, which will vary a little bit depending on what kind of attraction you are. So first of all, we just want to mention that based on the learnings from our first round, where we sent out that survey, you saw a screenshot of it. We originally sent that via SurveyMonkey, via a link to selected attractions. And we definitely wanted to improve upon this process by making it easier to access for everyone, as well as a little bit less cumbersome to fill out because it is so exhaustive. So we decided the best way to do this was to insert a refined, pared down version of the survey right into the back end of our website, which can be accessed via the extranet. We did this so that information can be automatically and seamlessly uploaded into an attractions listing on the hub, which you saw, without having to manually collect and enter. It also will allow attractions to take the survey on their own time, which we of course encourage you to do sooner rather than later. So if you don't know what the extranet is, we'll discuss the specifics for how to access that in just a little bit. But first, I want to provide an overview of what the survey looks like. So for those of you who are familiar with extranet, when you log in, this is the page you should see. You'll see a new feature on the left called Marketplace. Below this, you'll see 3 options: attractions, lodging, and restaurants. And this is what you'll click on when you want to take the survey. So we essentially created 3 different surveys based on these categories, and it's geared toward that type of facility. So it's still customized in a sense, like we did earlier. So, and you'll also see, like Sarah mentioned before, when we went through all of those listings of the amenities, some of the questions, say you're an attraction and you click on the attraction button, you'll still see some questions that don't pertain to you. For example, we have questions in there about beaches and amusement parks and pools. If that doesn't apply to you, you just skip over it. But we separated them out, so it was much easier. So once you click on an appropriate category, you'll be brought to a screen that will ask you to register. You're not really registering for anything. This is just what will bring you to the survey questions. So once you're in, you should see a few things. Your account information. So you'll see the little drop down there. Right now it says New York State Division of Tourism, but you would want to, find your name of your facility. So if you're a must-see attraction, it should just pop right up. If you're a TPA, which we'll go over this in a little bit, you'll just find the attraction that you're filling it out for. You'll also find what section you're working on. So this will just help you keep track of where you are in the survey, and it will tell you what we're asking questions about. And these line up to, again, those slides we showed you, all of the available accessible amenities that show up in your listing. And then finally, you'll see what question we're actually asking you about. So everyone will just have a few general questions. Those are about parking and bathrooms, just as an example. We also have questions about, most questions are simple yes, no in a drop-down box, but you'll also see here that we have some radio buttons, and these are for specific questions that have several aspects to whether or not that will show up in your amenity listing. Like Sarah mentioned, instead of just asking, are you an accessible bathroom? We're asking, various different questions, and you'll just click on the radio buttons as they appear here. So again, we wanted to simplify it so that, you're just going through and clicking as opposed to, filling out in boxes, typing. So we also have some questions with specific information in it. It's a little small on the screen, but you'll see here under the accessible bathroom. We still want to be following the specific ADA requirements for certain questions. And so all of the information you would need to know to answer that question is right there. You shouldn't need to go anywhere else to find the requirements for answering that question. And finally, we're only going to be serving up questions that are relevant to your facility, similar to the old survey. So for this one, you'll see here, again, it's a little small, but this is in the restaurant category. We're asking about if the restaurant offers vibrating pagers or sending other messages to let people know that the table is ready. So this is just an example that some of you might see. If you're a restaurant, or if you're not a restaurant, you wouldn't see this question. So again, we want to make it as user-friendly as possible. Great, so now we're going to move into how you can access. So it's broken up into a few different categories. So this is for our must-see attractions. For those of you that are must-see attraction, you should have direct access to the marketplace via the I Love New York extranet and can go in and fill out the survey on your own, much like you would if you were editing your own listings. If you're not familiar with a certain accessible features, if you're not sure if you are a must-see attraction, you can go to our website and click on your listing. And if you see featured in the box, then you are a must-see attraction. So you can go in and take the survey on your own. We would recommend that you alert your TPA that you are participating in the program and letting them know when you have completed the survey, just so they know that you're participating in the program. And if you have problems for whatever reason accessing the extranet, you can email ilny-listings@esd.ny.gov. Most of the time, this will be because we don't have the correct contact information, or maybe it's old contact information. And so we just have to update who it is that is accessing so that you can go in directly and get to the survey. Next is TPAs. So the TPAs will need to assist some of the attractions, those that aren't must-sees, just as you would for any listing updates. So what we've done to make this, again, as easy as possible, we've put a lot of thought into how to do this so that, you know, it's not overly burdensome and that it's easy for everybody. We have created PDF versions of the survey on the back end, and we're going to be sending those out after the webinar for you to keep in your files. So what we recommend is if you receive a request to participate in the program from an attraction, you would send the appropriate PDF file pertaining to the facility. So whether it's the lodging or the restaurant or the attraction file, that attraction will fill out the survey on their own time and return it to you. And then using the login credentials that you have, you would go in and access the marketplace via the I Love New York extranet. And from there, you would choose the appropriate category like we showed in the previous slides, lodging, restaurant, or attractions, navigate to the correct account, which we showed again earlier, that drop down bar. And then you would just insert the info using the PDF as a guide. And it shouldn't take more than 2 to 3 minutes because you'll just be clicking all of the buttons and submitting. And again, we don't anticipate every attraction filling out every single question because that would be a very large attraction with lots of features. So it should go relatively quickly. And again, if you need assistance, you can let us know by using a new email we've set up, and it's at the end of the slide, but it's ilny@esd.ny.gov. Okay, and then for all other attractions, if you are not a must-see, you'll have to work with your TPA to get your information uploaded on the back end. Again, if you're not sure if you're a must-see, you can visit our website, navigate to your listing, and just see if it has a featured badge on the listing. And we recommend the following: that you reach out to your local TPA and inform them that you would like to participate in the program, and ask that they send the PDF version of the survey that you would preemptively fill out. You correctly fill out that survey, and then you send it back to the TPA asking that they upload it into the extranet. And again, if you have any questions or if you're having difficulty, please contact us at ilny@esd.ny.gov, and one of our team members can certainly assist you. And we just want to point out, this is a new process. We're launching it today, so there'll likely be a few bumps, but we do want to make sure that it's smooth and an easy process for everyone. So please let us know if you're having any problems by emailing that email you see on the screen. And as I mentioned, we'll follow up with the specific instructional sheets. That's much more, these 3 slides that you last saw, we expanded on this. We put together instructions sheets. We'll be sending those out for each of the must-see, TPA, and other attractions. And then finally, just to close out, Craig mentioned earlier, but we just want to let everyone know that ODO has told us that what we're doing here is one of the most comprehensive statewide accessibility guides in the country to date, which we're very proud of. And we're eager to build on this process by encouraging more attractions to fill out the survey and get that information on the hub. And so with much appreciation, we thank everybody for joining and for your critical role in ensuring that New York continues to be welcoming to all visitors, regardless of physical limitations, ability, or age.
Thank you, Kelly. So we did have a few questions come in as we were speaking, and I just wanted to point to some of those. The first one, if Craig or Laurel might be able to help. This is from Kevin Peterson. He writes, you mentioned offering discounts for those with disabilities. How do you identify who would be eligible for discounts when often a disability cannot be seen or noticed?
Yeah, in that case, it would be the person self-identifying as having a disability and actually asking for the discount. So
great. And then a few other people are just asking about having access to today's presentation. We're certainly happy to share this presentation. We're also recording it as well to be made available for folks at a later date or for those folks that couldn't join. Obviously, because there's a lot of really good information in here, especially about how the process works to participate in the program. Just looking through some of the other questions. But we will be providing the surveys out to folks, especially as Kelly had mentioned, must-see attractions, TPAs will all be getting, and attractions will all have access to the survey to take at a later date.
Sarah, can I ask a question?
Yep.
So one of the things that, of course, we're interested in is people improving accessibility over time. So as people make changes, how do they go about getting that into the, into the survey? Do they go back in and update their own survey, or they would go through their TPA, or how would they do it?
Yes. Kelly, correct me if I'm wrong, but the back end and basically the way it works, and a lot of the TPAs or the attractions will know this, is that they can go back into their listings at any time to update any kind of information that's, not just accessibility information, but if they change their hours or something. The same will be for the accessibility surveys. They're all always going to be accessible via the back end. So if folks take the survey and then think, oh, we can update that, they can go back, find that question, and then be able to get that amenity within their accessibility. They'll be able to get that accessibility amenity on their listing.
Yes, they can go back in and they can edit any of the questions. If it's a must-see, they can go in, they can do that on their own. If they're not a must-see, they'll just let their local TPA know. We would encourage everybody. Another reason we made the PDFs is that in addition to having the accessibility information on our website, it's always great if you can to put it on your own website if people are visiting you directly. And so by putting this in a PDF, granted, it might not be as visually as appealing, but there's no reason you couldn't put the PDF on your own website showing what you do and do not have that's accessible, just showing the accessibility features that you have. And you'll see once you receive the PDF, it's really simple. It's the questions. It's very similar to the survey on the back end where they're just tick box, yes or no.
Melanie actually asked a question about if the accessibility amenities that are part of Simple View could be adapted for the DMOs and the TPAs that use Simple View. And I'm not sure if we have an answer on that, but we can certainly circle back with you, Melanie, and let you know. Unless Kelly, you were aware, but I wasn't sure. We'll circle back on that one. But basically the thought is, because a lot of people are asking if they can have access to the survey, we want everybody to have access to the survey. that's the main goal, is for everybody to take the survey and to have their accessibility data. Even if it's not just with the I Love New York website, you can certainly put it up on your own websites. Or like I said before, you can use it as a blueprint to determine, if there are things that maybe you want to update at your site, or if there are ways that you want to market to this incredibly valuable segment. But everyone will have access to the survey. I think when it just comes to the back end, there might be more questions, and that's why we're going to offer this webinar to folks to be able to go back and consult. And like Kelly had mentioned before, we have this email address. And of course, Kelly and I are also always available to answer questions to anybody that has any questions about how to get their information up on the website, or any other questions about accessibility. There was another question just for Laurel and Craig. Can you give us more information about the disability awareness training that was mentioned earlier?
Yes, what we do in the training is talk about, again, the myths and misconceptions, but then we talk about common courtesies and work through each of the different types of disabilities to talk about what are the do's and don'ts in terms of working with these customers. What are ways to make sure their needs are met? What are they most interested in? What's really most important to them? So that you have a better understanding of each type of disability. Obviously, the most important thing is always asking, how can I best assist you? And then following what the person is asking you. But our idea is that it breaks down some of the fear barriers that do exist. Because if you're not providing training to all of your staff, you're going to get inconsistent customer service. And some people are actually afraid to interact with people with disabilities because they haven't had the experience. And everybody's experience is different. I grew up with kids with disabilities. So for me to work in this field, it just came natural because those were my friends. But for a lot of people, that's not true. And that's why the training is important.
Great, thank you.
Sarah, I just want to revisit Melanie's question. So I think in general, we could theoretically, it would just have to be exactly like ours. So we would just have to chat on the back end involving SimpleView, but that's something we can certainly revisit.
Hey, David and Ross, have we missed any questions, or are there anything that we missed in the Q&A?
There was a question about where can we find additional information on providing sensitivity to staff?
That one I think would be directed toward Craig and Laurel, because they're the ones that that have programs that do that kind of sensitivity training. I don't know, Craig and Laurel, if you guys want to talk about what you guys offer.
Well, what we tried to do in conjunction with I Love New York, really with you in mind and your attractions in mind, is to put up a sensitivity training program, which is more general. So often we work specifically with trains or airlines or airports. This is more general for anyone serving the public. But as we mentioned earlier, just getting that tips sheet on appropriate language and common courtesies will be a first start, because it's something you can get and then distribute to your employees I know right now everyone's budgets are very limited, but at least that will give you something so that you can make sure your staff are not using inappropriate terms like handicapped or physically challenged, or some of those things which people really don't want to hear. Same thing with older travelers. Some of us are a little sensitive to the word senior, or the word elderly can really be off-putting. So again, with seniors, they also don't want to hear about disability. So we actually talk about how that part of the market differs, even though those people may have disabilities. So I think the tip sheet will help. And it's, that contact information is on one of the earlier slides, so it will be on the presentation when it goes out.
Great. Yes, and if folks are interested in having their staff trained, that's where I would refer you back to Open Doors and their contact information that was earlier given, which we can share again with folks following the webinar. Someone did ask if we could define what TPA stands for. Apologies for not doing that earlier. TPAs are tourism promotion agents. So there's one in every county of the state. If you're unsure of who your TPA is, your tourism promotion agent is, we provide resources, I believe, on our website, right, Kelly?
Yeah, if you go to our website, you scroll all the way to the bottom left corner, it says industry, very small letters. You click on that and it brings you to a PDF of all the tourism promotion agents for all the counties with their contact information.
And we had a question, is disability awareness training customized to travel and tourism hospitality industries? So again, that's one for Craig and Laurel, but that is something that they work very specifically in. I don't know.
Yes, it is customized, and we actually have separate training program for lodging and specifically. So if it's not up, it will be up in the near future. We also travel to come in and train staff, so it's not, we also do on-site training as well as online training. So, but we have worked a long time with the lodging industry, and obviously there's specific things there that need to be addressed that may not be appropriate for other attractions.
Great. And then I know Judy had a question about if the TPAs will be notified if we reach out to the must-see attractions. And so the way that we have the process right now is that must-see attractions can request the survey, and then they should let their tourism promotion agent know once they've filled the survey out. If there are any questions about, which must-see attractions might have already filled it out or are working on it, we can let them know. If we had sent the survey out to any individual must-see attractions, you can contact that email address that we provided before, the I Love New York accessible at esc.ny.gov, and we can update you there. Just looking through some other questions. And yes, we will share all of the contact information for all of the hosts. Again, actually, if somebody could just drop that into the chat, so everybody has access to that. Great. So I know there are a few other questions, but I think we can collect all of those and reach out individually, because I think that they're a little bit particular, unless I'm missing anything. If anybody has seen anything, great. So with that, I think that we can wrap the program.
Yes, well, this is Ross again. So thank you, Sarah, and thanks also to Kelly and Craig and Lauren. I found it to be an informative presentation, even as much as I've been involved in this for a while now. There was some great new information to hear as well. So I hope everyone else found the workshop information helpful as well. As you heard alluded to, we are going to be following up with everybody who has been on the webinar here. We'll be sending an email. First and foremost, to get your feedback on the webinar. This is, as I said, the first one we've done. So in the interest of making future ones better, we're going to be very interested in your feedback. We're also going to provide the information there to let you know how you can see this presentation again or make it available to other people that you think could benefit from seeing it. That way we could have as many people as possible know about this information. Also, particularly for the folks who haven't worked with I Love New York before, and this is your first real connection with us, we encourage you to stay in touch, certainly on this topic, but in fact, more broadly about ways that we can work together to collectively make New York State a more desirable place for visitors, and collectively work to bring more visitors here once it is safe to do so. So please do stay in touch with Sarah and Kelly on the Accessible Tourism Program. Kelly will be particularly important as Sarah prepares to go on maternity leave soon. And also Heather McElhenney on our team is able, and the rest of us are available for for any of the other general ways we can work together. You can see a contact email on the screen there as well, info@ilny.com. And so we hope you found this productive. We certainly hope to see you at a future program, and we very sincerely thank you for your participation today. Thank you so much for your time.